Oh yeah. Oh, you were saying someone from Spain. Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a place to be. Place to be.
Great place.
Cool.
Yes.
So welcome everyone. My name is Sri Krishnamurthy from QuantUniversity. Thank you all for joining in. This is the QuantUniversity guest lecture series. And as you all know, we focus on frontier topics in the areas of machine learning, data science, and artificial intelligence. And in the last year or two, we have been inviting eminent speakers, researchers, academics, and practitioners from various areas to talk about their research and work. And also we have invited speakers who have practiced and applied these technologies, which in companies, large banks, asset management companies, etc., and also researchers in federal labs and other entities who have been working on frameworks on maturing the whole process of artificial intelligence adoption. In that realm, last year we had invited Riva Schwartz from NIST, and she gave an amazing presentation on the area of bias and looking at how you can think about assessing bias in various machine learning systems. And as most of you are aware, the Artificial Intelligence Risk Management Framework 1.0 was released by NIST I guess it's more than a few weeks now. It says for a few months, I guess, a few months now. So we are very pleased to invite Riva to present a masterclass on what this artificial intelligence risk management is all about. And this has gone through a lot of iterations and a lot of work, a lot of public comments, and a lot of researchers and a lot of practitioners have provided feedback. And I was fortunate enough to kind of review some of the initial drafts and also have been able to track some of the progress as time has gone, and the framework has been more mature and it's now kind of ready for deployment, if you will, in an enterprise setting. So Riva, I'm just going to read your bio for context so that people can kind of get to know you better. So Riva is a research scientist at the ITL at the NIST, or the National Institute of Standards and Technology. She serves as a principal investigator on bias in artificial intelligence for NIST Trustworthy and Responsible AI program. Her research focuses on the role of context in human language and behavior, the nature of subject matter expertise and expert judgment in socio-technical systems, and the role of gatekeepers within institutions. She has advised federal agencies about how experts interact with automation to make sense of information in high-stakes settings. Riva received her MA from the University of Florida in acoustics and sociophonetics, and her BA in political science from Kent State University. Her background includes a forensic science posting for almost 15 years at the United States Secret Service, advising forensic science practice at NIST, a temporary duty assignment at the National Security Agency, and an adjunct researcher at the Johns Hopkins University Human Language Technology Center of Excellence. Welcome, Riva. Really appreciate you taking your time up and presenting this session with us. Thank you so much, and the stage is yours.
Thank you, Sri, and thanks for that unnecessarily long bio. I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. And thank you all for joining us today. Okay, let's go full screen. I can remember how to. Oh, what happened to my? Okay, sorry everyone. This is the Zoom. Sorry, everything's moved and now I can't move anything. Here we go. Okay, full screen. All right, can you all see everything? Yes. Okay. So the TLDR, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the AI risk management framework, or if you had an opportunity to provide comments or attend one of our workshops, but the TLDR on the framework is that basically, AI is not magic. It comes with risks, and the resulting impacts of those risks are real. These risks and impacts extend far beyond the AI pipeline. This gets to the concept of AI as a socio-technical system, and addressing these and managing these risks right now, at least until regulation or other processes come to the fore, have to exist and occur within the confines really of organizations. So what is the AI risk management framework and how does it help organizations? The reality is that AI systems are built and used within organizational environments based on individual and organizational decision-making across the enterprise and reflect a variety of organizational and broader incentives and purposes. So the AI risk management framework seeks to move the needle really on how organizations perceive AI as being more than, first of all, just the AI pipeline itself, just the math, the data, the models, and the algorithms, to thinking of it as being influenced by all sorts of other societal constructs and concepts and factors and impacting society writ large. So but the first most important thing you need to really know about the AI risk management framework is that it is voluntary. This is not regulation or legislation or law. No organization or any entity is mandated to follow it, but it's a resource designed to help AI companies who build, design, use AI systems, or even evaluate AI systems to manage those risks. It takes a rights-preserving approach. It is flexible. It is purposefully designed to be general. It is not within a given context, such as financial services or healthcare. And ultimately, it seeks to drive measurement within for risk for AI systems. So what we've been doing, for the last 18 months is to develop this framework. It has been about 6 weeks since we released it at the end of January. But we were tasked to do this in, here's the timeline. What it doesn't show is in January 2021, Congress mandated NIST to develop the AI risk management framework, mostly due to the success of our other frameworks, such as the cybersecurity framework and the privacy framework. Basically wanted us to do a similar type of operation for AI risks. And since July of 2021, we had been developing that. We went through three drafts, so a concept paper and 2 drafts, and had 3 workshops. Like all of our other work across our campus, not just in AI or in technology, we follow an open and transparent process. People, any entity or individual is encouraged to submit their comments. Over the life of the program, we had 240 organizations submit over 400 comments, and all of that material is available online, including our workshops. So before we get started, I do want to take a minute to talk about terms and how they are, which is always important in standards work or guidance, and how specifically we define a couple of really important high-level concepts here within the AI RMF. One is AI systems. You can read it for yourself, but generally we want to make sure that people are recognizing that we define systems as those things that generate outputs such as predictions, recommendations, or decisions that influence real or virtual environment, and it can operate with varying levels of autonomy. This becomes important as we consider the risks presented by technology such as generative AI. I will note that this definition of AI systems is now being postulated as the definition that should be used in the EU AI Act. We also define risk as the composite measure of an event's probability of occurring and the magnitude or degree of consequences should that event occur. So the important point here is that we take a kind of broad view of risk in saying that impacts of AI systems, the risk can create situations that, yes, are negative, but can also be positive. So it can result in opportunities or threats. And another big slide here on terminology, the goal of, we talked about how we want to move the needle within organizations. So we want to change a lot. We would like organizations to change a lot about how they develop and think about and approach AI. AI system trustworthiness is at the center of that conversation and that suggestion. We define or really list and describe AI system trustworthiness as having 7 characteristics. These characteristics were, again, this gets to public comments. This was a consensus set of characteristics. First and foremost, AI systems should be safe and not contributing any kind of physical or emotional harm to anybody.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
I don't know if the slides are changing because I can only see like the AI RMF, the first slide.
Really?
Yeah, so maybe it's sharing the wrong screen. It's not probably sharing the full screen more. It's just sharing the Adobe PDF. Right. Yeah, now I can see the. Okay.
Well, I guess I apologize for that, everyone. Let's just stay, I guess, with this sloppy looking. So can you see it though?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. All right. So again, safety is first and foremost, but systems, we have validity and reliability kind of across all of these characteristics. And, a lot of people are concerned with AI being accurate or functional. But of course, for systems to be trustworthy, they have to be more than that. Accuracy isn't the same as validity, and validity and reliability underlie everything. Without valid systems, systems cannot be trustworthy. Without safety, systems cannot be trustworthy. Systems should be secure and resilient, meaning that they're able to adapt to different types of environments, including adversarial environments. Systems should be explainable and interpretable, which means that people should be able to understand why and how AI systems came to the conclusions that it did, or how the output that it's received should be understandable. Privacy enhanced, obviously fairness, which we talk about harmful biases being managed. I'll get into that a little bit later in the deck. And the processes within the organization developing AI for it to be trustworthy should be accountable and transparent. So why is this hard? Why is managing the risk of AI so difficult, and why hasn't this really been done before? So first of all, measuring AI risks there's significant difference with, we tend to think about AI, especially in the commercial realm, that AI is pushed out and based on in laboratory measurements versus in the real world. And risk happens more in the real world than in the laboratory. So there's a mismatch there. Risk tolerance is hard. So some organizations like financial services have risk tolerances defined for them, or FDA, medical device, and other kinds of things in healthcare. So risk tolerances come from a lot of places, but many, some from regulatory and legal requirements, but many professions, disciplines, practices do not have defined risk tolerance. So NIST does not declare what an organization's risk tolerance is, and we do not in this document tell organizations how to do that. That will be a forthcoming document. What we say is that organizations should develop what we call reasonable risk tolerance and then apply the AI risk management framework. And prioritizing risk is also a big challenge in many ways. One is once people realize that there's a lot of risk out there, they want to find ways to get rid of all of it. That's not a good path forward. You can't eliminate all risk. So this is where risk tolerance comes in. But ultimately, what we're trying to do is come up with approaches for the culture that within the organization to integrate risk perspectives and make it everybody's job, but not nobody's job, and as part of a broader risk management efforts, such as risk management across the enterprise. So the core, if you will, of the AI risk management framework is the core. It is 4 functions: map, measure, manage, and govern. These are where the exercise, the outcomes that the organization should be considering and should be aspiring towards occur. They are broken down into categories and subcategories, and I will get to those categories in just a minute. But first, I want to talk a little bit about who is this life cycle, who is this framework for. We talk about people along the life cycle as AI actors, but ultimately in the center of this life cycle, you'll see people in the planet. So the people in the planet, the general public is not necessarily taking direct part in the development of technology, but they should be a core consideration for trustworthiness and for risks and impacts. They are the people for whom the risks and impacts splash onto, and considering them at the center and core of all of this is really important. Ultimately, we say that AI actors should really be tracking a few things: impacts, risks, trustworthiness, and harms, and limitations. And it takes a variety of AI actors. It's not just development team. It's not just the design team. There's place for a variety of subject matter experts, both within the organization, external to the organization, and including finding ways to bring in voices of people who might be impacted, who are not necessarily even users. So governance is a mechanism for organizations to kind of stop playing catch up to worrying about AI risks. A new technology comes along, a new AI process comes along, and every organization has to think about how they're going to play catch up to either put something out that's like it or think about how that's going to impact their internal processes. Strong governance practices kind of liberates organizations from having to play this kind of catch up. And the governance process within the AI RMF provides a space for organizations to focus on policies and procedures and honing internal culture to consider risks, again, across the board, not just one type of profession and discipline within the life cycle. This is where the workforce diversity comes into place, consideration of accessibility factors, but ultimately creating a risk culture doesn't happen overnight. I'm sure those of you working in the financial services industry are very familiar with all that needs to happen to create strong governance structures and culture. So the map function is, we like to just say, it's kind of all about context and kind of walk away. But really, what does that mean? So context means a lot more than whether a piece of technology is for computer vision or for healthcare or financial services. It's bigger than that. It's trying to take into consideration all the ways that AI tools are used, but will also be reused and repurposed and misused in unpredictable and unplanned for ways. That doesn't mean that everybody in the company needs to start like some huge spreadsheet of, and go to like, a retreat and spend months thinking about all the ways that something bad can happen. It's thinking about where else that information can come from. A lot of that information can come from the users and the operators. Some of that can come from stakeholder engagement activities with community groups of where the specific AI tool could be deployed. So really what we're, to get better at context, we lay out in the map function all the kinds of actions that organizations can take both across the organization and within specific teams. So what are people measuring in the AI risk management framework? What do we mean here by measure? They're measuring a number of things. So in the map function, organizations or teams are kind of enumerating various risks and limitations and potential harms. Those should be tracked Some of these things are qualitative, not necessarily numerical. But when there are existing measurement approaches, quantitative measurement approaches for these trustworthy characteristics, for example, those should be brought to bear. When we have benchmarks to use, those should be brought to bear. But there's going to be a lot of things that come up, should be a lot of things that come up in MAP that organizations had not already thought of. And there's a place here for some real innovation and for real out-of-the-box thinking about how, first, how do you even define, describe, and characterize these risks? How do you track them? How do you build that tracking into numerical metrics? And then, of course, I think the most important thing here is, we talk extensively in the framework and in the playbook, which I'll talk about in a minute, about TEV, which is testing, evaluation, validation, and verification methods. Testing, all of those four things are separate and distinct. Testing is not evaluation. Evaluation is not validation. Validation is not verification. Those are all separate things. There are people in your team or on organizational teams who will have a variety of those expertise. And validation is particularly important because, as we noted, validity and reliability are key to trustworthy characteristics. So now that we have all this information about our risks and we're tracking them, what happens? So that happens in the manage function, and it's really a lot about treating risk. And this is responding to risk, recovering from risk, communicating about risk, and of course, documenting risk. All of these functions are iterative and feed into each other, really, except governance. Without governance has to happen. We say that these functions can happen in any order, but really governance has to happen first and must be in place, because without strong governance, all of these other activities don't really have anything to really stick to. Yeah.
Sorry, with this question, if I may.
Please.
So, actually, a couple of things. Give me 1 second. The question just vanished. So there's a question on trustworthiness, and it's subjective. So how do we make it more concrete was the question.
How do we make trustworthiness more concrete? Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a really good question. So just like we said that testing and evaluation are 4 distinct things, trustworthiness can be perceived as 7 separate things, but really they all feed on each other, right? Harmful bias is very close to security and privacy and interpretability. And interpretability is really close to transparency, and accountability is really close to bias. So these all kind of bleed into each other. We have steps in the playbook that give, and it's good we're on this slide because it gives me an opportunity to describe what the playbook is. So the reason why we created a playbook is that the tables in the core for the functions talk about outcomes, and they say, organizations should have, for example, a diverse workforce. Organizations should have awareness of laws and regulations. But how do people actually do that? So we provide specific actionable suggestions for organizations that they can follow. They are not required to follow them. And there's a lot there. It's not a checklist. It's not something that we expect people to follow every action in there. But within measure 2, specifically, we walk through each of the trustworthy characteristics and techniques that organizations and teams and the different players on those teams can carry out to enhance AI system trustworthiness. And these are repeatable. So over time, organizations should get better at thinking about them. But it also requires a lot of information sharing. So you don't necessarily want one team really focused on on interpretability, but isolated and not connecting to the other characteristics. Does that help answer?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the clarity.
Thank you, and thanks for asking that question on this slide. So that's kind of in a nutshell what the framework is, but there's a lot of activities and things in general that are connected to the framework. And in fact, there are 10 of them, as you see on this slide. The content of these 10 things on this slide relate to come directly from our AI RMF roadmap, which we also released the day that we launched the framework, which was January 26th. So I'm not going to walk through all 10 of these things, but key among them are number 2, expanded test evaluation, validation, and verification efforts, especially around risk. The idea of managing and measuring AI risks is kind of new. We don't really know, or it's very narrow, to be clear. And so we want to ourselves and with others develop guidance on how to do that. Again, I'm going to get to that in a couple of slides, but for one specific topic of AI bias. The biggest post-launch thing that we're really working on are the profiles. Profiles are specific specific contexts for the AI RMF. So I probably didn't make it as clear as I probably could have during this, that the AI RMF is purposefully general. We do not have examples. They are not tied to a given context. For the framework to be successful, it has to be adopted. It's kind of in the hands of the adopters, and those adopters are usually expected to be within a specific use case, industry context. So whether that's facial recognition, or whether it's healthcare, or whether it's a subpart of healthcare, hiring, employment, automated employment tools. We could go on and on about all the different types of contexts that the AI risk management framework could be used for. Also within, not just within, not just a vertical within an industry, but across industries. So certain workflows. How should AI risk management framework be brought to bear to identify risks in the cloud, in the use of cloud in business practices? So if you want to do a profile, you do not have to ask our permission for it, but we'd love to hear about it. We'd love to be in the room for the conversation. So that's kind of the biggest thing that's going on. We also want to measure the effectiveness of the framework. We want to hear about what's working for organizations and what isn't. Case studies, kind of similar to profiles, but this is really more profiles are really kind of across industries. Case studies, one company could just write a paper about how they use the framework within their company. And all this, the developing reasonable risk tolerances, I think I had mentioned, we will be developing guidance on that, along with other long form guidance on many of the topics within the framework. So I want to just take a couple minutes and talk about, in this case, I guess it would be a use case, not a profile, but how you could use the AI risk management framework to manage the risk of AI bias. So this slide comes directly from this document that we released last year in March 2022, called Special Publication 1270. This was the first time around that I was here on QU series. The full title is Towards a Standard for Identifying and Managing Bias in Artificial Intelligence. And what we tried to get across is just like, common themes to the framework, that we have to think beyond the AI pipeline. Yes, biases exist within the data, and they exist within the models underlying AI, but there are many other sources of bias in AI system that can influence AI systems. These are systemic biases and human biases. And so how can we use the AI risk management framework to address all three of these categories of bias? So we have specific call outs to fairness and bias, and in the playbook specifically. There are topics from SP 1270 discussed across all 4 functions in the playbook. And we have a specific focus on test and evaluation in measure 2.11 for fairness and bias. Now, most of those recommendations are about computational and statistical forms of bias, and then computational and statistical approaches to address those types of biases. So we're talking things like pre and post processing, fairness metrics within a given context, data representativeness within a specific context, forms of optimization and model selection. And we describe best practices for all of those things within measure 2.11. And when we were developing the content for how organizations should address systemic and human cognitive biases, it was a little more difficult because we've been so focused on the first type that we're not really thinking about those other 2 types. And it's just harder. They're just more difficult, and which explains, by the way, one reason why people tend to, kind of go with low-hanging fruit. But there are some things that organizations can do to address systemic and human cognitive forms of bias. Impact assessments are an excellent tool for that. Thinking about the development of the objective function and changing it to be more aligned with values rather than the societal values rather than the specific use case at a given time. Kind of again thinking larger about risks and limitations. Various forms of validation, such as construct validity, the use of proxies, for example, for unobservable phenomena such as hireability or criminality or addictiveness. Have those proxies been validated? If not, that's a really good way to control for systemic bias, making sure that your constructs are valid before you push that content, or before you push that tool out into the ecosystem. Leveraging domain expertise across the board, but specifically for human factors, sociocultural approaches, the use of human-centered design approaches are other ways to kind of counteract specifically human cognitive bias. But ultimately, what we're talking about is treating AI systems as sociotechnical systems for those latter 2 categories. And this gets to how can we get better at that, or make that, getting back to that kind of original first question, how do we make this stuff more concrete rather than just kind of picking out of thin air things that we might think work? And I think that this gets to, and again, I know this, the amazing graphics on this slide. It's all my amazing graphic skill. But what and where are we currently measuring? So the things that are darkened in blue are where we currently measure, and all the not, the clear things are where we're not measuring. And the checkbox is, kind of this consistent pattern of things that we test. So we tend to test the system and the model, the life cycle, the computational processes, and the system itself. That's where most of the testing happens, for a variety of reasons. Usually, the people who do the work in development, that's what they're comfortable with doing. That's what they know how to do. We sometimes test this little human face here on the edge of the system in the organization. Sometimes we test that human, either they're the operator, an expert end user, sometimes the general public, so MTurk, the explosion of MTurk is a good example of these kinds of tests. But what we don't really look at is the fact that these systems exist within an organization. We don't really study the organization itself. And we don't really take a look at the whole context of use that these systems are deployed in, and the influences and impacts from society, from groups, from the institution itself, and the impacts onto society. We are not currently measuring those things. So as part of a future NIST evaluation, and we should have in the next couple months document and planning for this evaluation, we plan to do a sociotechnical systems evaluation where we are thinking about those kind of big 4 things or big 5 things that we talk about in the framework. So risks, impacts, harms, and trustworthiness, also system limitations. But we're also thinking, how can we measure human and organizational factors? Governance is a really strong tool to be brought to bear in managing AI risks. How do we measure governance? How do we know what governance aspects work best? And how can we measure different companies? How can different companies measure their own governance processes? What about human AI teaming? And we talk about the need for interdisciplinary teams. How do we measure that? How do we define it? This evaluation will have will require traceability and contestability so that we understand all the things that are happening across this much broader pipeline. So again, watch for evaluation in that area. And then, for more information, we will be releasing our Trustworthy and Responsible AI Resource Center at the end of this month, which will have the framework, the playbook, the updated, not beta version of the playbook, a glossary of terms in the field of trustworthy and responsible AI, all of our existing documents in this field, and AI standards tracker for the first round, and there will be other stuff coming. And if you ever want to email us, we are at aiframework@nist.gov. And I'll stop right there. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you so much, Rima. And I think for the question, yes, we will be posting the recording. So this session is being recorded. So I actually have a couple of questions, and let me start with the question which I keep hearing the most, or I've been hearing the most in the last 2 months, and I briefly talked about it before we started this session. So the last 2 months, we have seen an explosion of interest in natural language processing / ChatGPT, large language models, foundation models, and especially coming from the financial industry, there has been a lot of enthusiasm and interest. People are kind of already posting on blog posts saying, oh, what are the opportunities in terms of investment research, in terms of framing the question, et cetera, but also institutions are taking a very cautious approach. Some of the larger institutions have already put in a ban on using ChatGPT within organizations, and I've also got some queries from people about privacy risks and data risks, because
right.
present questions, but there is also a concern how much of it is being leaked into the model itself, which could potentially harm customer data and also associated things. So how do you see the risks associated with large language models? Because here we may not have access to the actual model, and the constraints and the governance processes are not going to be as easy as something which you can control and rein in within an institutional setting.
Great question, timely question. Thankfully, when we were developing the framework, some of these questions were, out and happening already. And we do talk about the need to govern pre-trained models in the governance section. So I think in every function we have a category or subcategory on third-party content. So those pre-trained models would be considered under that setting. So first of all, like any other, so I will say too, I think there's a profile being developed on language models, or I think they are just language models. There is a profile being developed on that, and so watch that space. And what they're doing is kind of what we say, go through governance, go through map, go through manage, go through map, measure, and manage. And specific to the risks of large language models, do it with a large group of people who understand it from all the possible contextual perspectives. And because if you're taking this kind of narrow view of ChatGPT as just the pipeline, then you're saying, oh, well, it's causing a risk because, well, first of all, is it valid and reliable? That's a problem for the trustworthy. Is it privacy enhancing? Probably not. Is it creating unfair or harmful bias? Probably in some settings. I know OpenAI has done what it can to address some of those things. But another area it really falls down is interpretable and explainable. We don't know where people can't check the veracity of statements because we don't know what the source is, right? We don't know what the source is. And I think the other thing that causes a problem with large language models or foundation models or whatever we want to call them is that because that information is being generated, all the work that's been done on data representativeness kind of goes out the window. Like what is data representativeness even? What does that even mean in the context of generative content? So our recommendation is just like we do think that risk management is a powerful tool that can be brought to bear for large language models. We know other people who are working on a profile for that. I believe we will be having a webinar / mini workshop on this very topic soon. I don't know when, but it will be soon to really walk through the specifics.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question which I typically get is basically, where do we start, right? Because I think one of my kind of purview of influence, if you will, like, when people talk about education, wherein we primarily focus on artificial intelligence risk management, the certification program we have, and also the content which we enable for people to be able to like understand the various facets of risks, right? So most companies at this point have already, at least in the financial services world, have established model risk management teams, wherein there is an existing governance structure, and typically there is obviously the SR 11.7, which has laid out like a framework for model risk management. And now I think the NIST framework, aligns in various ways with the OCCs in the SR 11.7, but obviously there is also a lot of recommendations with respect to how we measure, how we map, and kind of new terminologies, if you will. So the question, and people are already coming to us in terms of like, we want to get educated on how do we do it, because these are concepts which are new from our perspective. And we want to be able to like not only understand and adopt those processes, but also pragmatically put those processes in place. Now, how do you, and I know the profiles are going to be representative information, but I'm also curious your thoughts in terms of, what kinds of companies do you have in mind who would be like early adopters of this framework? And what kind of guidance would you give like smaller entities who may not have like the bandwidth to be able to like take a whole full-fledged approach to start from scratch and build out complete infrastructures?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we know, and I think we've said it in the framework itself, that implementing the guidance in the framework is going to be a lot harder for a small organization for a lot of reasons. Mostly because usually small shops just don't have that broad set of expertise that you need. It's probably just kind of getting product out, and now they have to be thinking about all of these risks. And you've told them there's this thing that's a sociotechnical system, and they're not even sure what that means. And so there's, kind of a big hump to get over as far as information. I mean, there definitely is. So first I would say, and I it's a shameless plug, but like the playbook is actually a good place to go to get started. The playbook gives a lot of information. We do not, in the new, so the playbook that's currently out there is the beta version. At the end of March, we will be releasing another. It's still not going to have its filtering capabilities. That's going to keep coming later. But ultimately, what's going to happen is if you log on to the resource center, it will ask you if you want to have a profile, and you can have like, hey, I'm a developer, show me content that I need for development, and map, measure, manage, and govern. So I'm not being overwhelmed with all of these recommendations or suggestions, but there are really actionable suggestions on where to get started. But as you said, the first thing that the most important thing in risk management is governance. Without it, you can't do any of this, because if the organizational management doesn't consider AI as having risks, doesn't take it seriously, doesn't set the commitment and organizational mood around risk, then all the work that groups are doing to map, measure, and manage the frontline practitioners, it can't connect to anything, and so they can't really do it. So the first place to start is governance. Laws and regulations, we say that's the first thing. Become aware of what are the applicable laws and regulations for your specific context of use. So if you are running, if you're trying to deploy an AI tool that is in housing, read all you can. You should be really, really familiar with the laws and regulations for housing. They're going to apply to you. And then, walk through, I think it's a little easier. In some ways, it's kind of easier for a small company or a new company, because if they didn't have already existing processes, they can start from scratch and just use the playbook as a way to get started. But if you're an existing company and you have a way of doing things now, well, gosh, do I have to overhaul everything? So what we say is try to insert as many of these processes as you can to get the biggest bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. And I think a related question, you did touch upon it a little bit, in terms of the purview of influence of how to make it like more contextual. Are there any efforts, to the extent to which you can disclose and talk about in public, to work with regulatory agencies to kind of have the NIST framework as basis for their individual efforts, like the financial industry or healthcare or other things? I'm kind of generalizing Sanjay's question in here, but I'm also curious to know, if there's SR 11.7, but is there an effort to say, okay, can they release something which incorporates some of the NIST guidelines as an enhancement or an addendum to existing regulatory frameworks which are already out there?
Yeah, so that is up to them, obviously. I can say, and I think you know this, Shri, but I don't know if the rest of the audience knows, we were very influenced by SR 11.7 in the development of the framework. We spent a lot of time talking to you and to others and who are familiar with this. We think that there are so many valuable insights, and the proof is in the pudding for SR 11.7. We tried to hardwire as many things as we could, not exactly, but we take a kernel from SR 11.7 and what we know worked, and tried to build some of our processes around that. A lot of SR 11.7's benefits come from the organizational structures and to create the separate lines of defense, strong risk culture, a culture that people feel open for sharing concerns about the technology. Again, without strong governance, you can't have any of those things. So we absolutely, SR 11.7 was a kind of fundamental for us and how we approached it. But of course, then we went out on our own and built our own thing. But it is very, influenced by it.
Absolutely. I think there's another question, and I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to completely get it. But any specific reason why the decision was centered around risk and not aspects like social justice and equity, which are concerns in other areas like social sciences and health sciences? And I have my own view on it, but I'd love to hear your view.
Yeah, the answer is it was decided for us. Really, that was the mandate. We didn't have that's what they wanted us to do as a risk management framework, not an equity-based one. I will, of course, the OSTP's Blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights helps fill that gap. We work with them on kind of how, and I think there's an FAQ out there about how our documents relate and don't relate. I mean, they're not at odds. They operate on different levels. So the AI risk management framework can be used to help. It can be, in a way to help operationalize the AI Bill of Rights. But yes, that was a decision that was made for us. So.
Absolutely. And another question which kind of came up in the last few days. So as you know, yesterday I gave a TEDx talk, and I was very much I kind of took a topic in terms of focusing on specialized artificial intelligence rather than AGI, which is kind of the term which has been thrown all over the media and everything in the last few weeks. Now, I also had a chance to listen to 50 plus speakers in the Boston area from MIT, Harvard, multiple places, which are innovative areas, which are coming up with 50, 60 years worth of innovative research being packaged into like a half a day setting. So it was fascinating to see the approaches of the use of data, the use of algorithms, and the visions people had. And these are not just ideas, they have been curated and they've been gone through PhD research and like 3 or 4 years worth of work. And we will see those in action in the next few years. And there will be fascinating innovations happening. And as you know, innovation travels much, much, much faster than regulation. Mm-hmm. And how do we catch it? Because, there are, even with, the first question I asked about ChatGPT, we are going to see so many more innovations which are going to come up in the next few years, which basically means that you are going to be rehauling the process in many ways, because the risks are going to be new, the concepts are going to be new. And frankly, I'm scared because of the possibilities and things you could potentially kind of see, especially with all the things which we are basically delegating to machines as decision-making entities at this point. Now, how do you see the AI RMF evolve, in the sense that is there going to be is True Auto already on the roadmap? Is there going to be some kind of splitting of, okay, from here on, this is how we're going to progress? I don't know what your immediate thoughts are, but what's the vision of the AI RMF evolving to kind of factor in the newer innovations, which probably we haven't seen yet in the next few years? Yeah,
so during the entire 18 months that we developed this, we heard from a lot of people about, trying to put in specific examples and we've, it's much to many people's chagrin, it is purposefully general. It is meant to be evergreen. It is meant to be as future-proof as possible. And why that is because what we've tried to do is create a structure within that organizations can operate within to get better at thinking about risks, no matter what those risks are. But they can only get as better as their team is and as their commitment is. So a lot of this is left to them. Like, we feel that there are that the recipe is there to control a number of these risks. I think there is probably a big set of or soon to be, eventually will be a big set, and that's when we'll know we have to update it, of risks that we're not thinking about. I'm sure that somebody's going to write a paper sooner or later, maybe a peer-reviewed article, maybe in the popular press, about what the AI RMF can't control. So I think what we can't control are bad actors, right? Like, this implies that organizations want to make sure that they're managing their risks. And sometimes they don't really have a lot of incentive to do that. We can't, those are things that we can't do much about. That's a regulatory action. Like, that's regulation that has to do that. What we're trying to do is, again, move the needle within organizations to recognize that these risks will come back to splash on them in a negative way. If you are deploying non-trustworthy technology, if you're deploying technology that causes societal impact, it's not good, and you don't want to do that. And here's a way to not do it. And so that's we've tried to make that as general and as purposeful and as risk management focused as it can be.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think we have like time for one last question. I'm going to see if there's anything specific. So yeah, I actually had a question, which I think was something I've seen a couple of things happen in the last few days. Do you see a role of another regulatory body to be focused on AI to basically become like the curating place rather than having multiple regulatory efforts, a centralized agency within the federal umbrella? Or do you consider right now that individual agencies should potentially have their own individual risk management efforts? I think Stuart Russell and other couple of people I've seen in the press have recently started talking about the possibility of having another entity focused on AI regulation.
I know that is being discussed. I will say that about 8 years ago, my background as a forensic scientist, there was discussion about an entity being in place to manage forensic science risks, and that never came to the fore. AI is obviously bigger. I don't know whether it's going to happen or not. I know that I think that the regulatory agencies that are working right now are working as hard as they can to manage these risks. So,
absolutely.
Yep.
Yeah. Perfect. So it's 1 o'clock, and thank you so much, Shriva. This was an enlightening session, and as always, it's a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you. I hope the audience also learned a lot today and getting to understand the framework and the possibilities. I know it's a very evolving, it's an evolving topic, and we are all learning on a daily basis. But I like the emphasis on the governance aspect and the appetite for understanding risk as a facet of an enterprise rather than just as somebody else's problem, which is to be controlled by somebody else rather than you. So I think the ownership and the ability to be able to responsibly look at what you are building and deploying is going to basically create a whole ecosystem of products which are much more mature and ready for use rather than kind of taking a Band-Aid and a scaffolding-based approach. I really appreciate your time, and thank you so much for presenting this, and also to the audience who've been listening and sharing their questions and views. Thank you so much, and we will meet again soon.
Thanks. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye, Sri.
Bye. Take care. Bye-bye.